a really detailed and informative presentation planned for you on the coming wildfire season, as well as prescribed burning, which is ongoing at this time of year. So with that in mind, and with as much as we have to discuss, just a few quick housekeeping notes before we get started. We do have some broadcast media on the call, so if you would please mute yourself for the duration of the presentation until we open it up to Q&A. I know that would be helpful for our broadcast colleagues. And after the presentation, we'll open it up to Q&A, and you can pose a question by clicking on the hand raising function at the top of the screen. So with that, I'll turn it over to our Commissioner, Sean LaTourette.
Thank you for that, Karen, and thank you to all of our friends in the Fourth Estate who have made time to be with us this afternoon. We've been spending a lot of time together, a good number of us, so it's good to see familiar faces and see names on the screen. So, you know, one of the things that we talked about in the context of the hearing that the Senate had held just a week or two ago, I'm losing track of the days, they all tend to blend together, with respect to climate change. And while this is not a climate change specific briefing, I think it's important to recognize the real risks that we face from continually warming climate, and certainly more information and more international study comes out seemingly every day. It surprises none of the folks here at DEP, and I imagine probably doesn't surprise many in the press to see international bodies talking about the extreme and very serious risk of wildfire across the globe. And I think here in New Jersey, we can easily, given how dense we are and the likelihood of folks to kind of stay close to home in many respects, I think we can easily look past the fact that 40% of the state is forested. And I think it surprised the Senate panel, our Senate Environment and Energy Committee, when I explained that we had over 900 wildfires in New Jersey last year. Over 900. And it shocks a lot of folks when we share that information. 946 to be exact. And we'll hear more from the folks here at DEP and in our incredible forest fire service that work so incredibly hard to both reduce the risk of forest fire in New Jersey while educating the public and responding to events as they unfold and making themselves available to others throughout the state in times of emergency and lending their good efforts across the country. And so I'm sure that you'll hear more about that today. But I think one of the things to keep in mind is that New Jersey, despite our very urban and exurban character, about 50% of our homes are built within the wildland urban interface, right? Where residents and forest meet, right? Making wildfires a real threat, more of a threat than we may easily recognize. And I think this came into focus a bit more than it might usually last year, when the team here, as they can explain to you in more detail, were responding to a fire in and around Lakewood. And there is stunning video that we have from across homeowners' Ring doorbells that show the results of wildfire getting so dangerously close. And one of the things that has my antenna up, there's a number of reasons that I sleep a couple inches above the bed. One of those reasons is because of our forest fire risk. And we've been in a bit of a dry spell these last few months. And that concerns me. It concerns me from a water security perspective, but it concerns me from a wildfire risk perspective. And we're lucky to have Greg McLaughlin and his team out working on prescribed burns so as to diminish that risk. And so I'll turn it over here to Greg and his team to take us through their presentation. And Greg, I'll say again, and Jeremy there, how deeply grateful we all are for your service. You keep us safe, and you're the duct tape of state government, as you well know. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, for that very nice and detailed introduction and the compliments as well. Forest Fire Service is the agency within DEP that is responsible for all vegetative fires, fires that are non-structural, fires that are off the road, off the pavement. And so in us conducting our mission, in terms of whether it's prevention, education, prescribed burning falls under prevention, or wildfire response, in a densely populated state, the most densely populated state, we oftentimes rely on our partners in the media, to help us to get messaging out to residents. And so thank you all for attending today. We've had these types of press briefings in past years, and they've seemed to help to keep the message factual and consistent, and to help clarify any discrepancies that may be in social media or other media venues. So it is important to us. I want to recognize that and thank you all again for your contributions and your time today. I have with me Rob Gill, who's our Safety and Aviation Officer. Rob will speak a little bit later about some technical things with drones and traffic for folks that may come out to a large wildfire event or may come out to a prescribed burn event. And we'll also talk about what we're doing to host something like that later. I have Assistant Commissioner John Cecil with us also today. So I'm going to let John speak a little bit about his vision for wildfire prevention and control and prescribed burning. And you'll notice, and feel free to correct me, we talk about prescribed burning, and that's the season we're in. So I'm going to talk about that first a little bit in detail. And I intentionally call it prescribed burning. But this past weekend, we had conducted a significant amount of that activity. And we'll work with New Jersey Department of Transportation and our other partners to put up signage and to get messaging out. And I noticed one of the signs on Route 195 said "Control burning in progress." So you'll hear this term interchange: prescribed burning and control burning. And so my point here is that we perform this activity by prescription. And so we tend to prefer to use the term prescribed burning. We do it in a controlled manner, but we don't want to allude to the fact that it could be uncontrolled, because that's not our intention. Uncontrolled fire is wildfire. So we'll get into a little more details of that, but I just wanted to point that out and give John a minute to introduce himself and give some overview and perspective.
Thank you, Greg. Great to be with you all this afternoon. Appreciate your attention to this very important topic. I started with the DEP in April of 2021 as the Director of Parks and Forestry, and now am moving into an Assistant Commissioner role as we work on a little bit of a reorganization. bringing forest fire back into the space with the Forest Service and the State Park Service and State Park Police. So I think that implementing the commissioner's vision for elevating the role of parks and forestry in the department is obviously a top priority for all of us. In the context of wildfire, I think what we're seeking to do is continue to advance a very proactive approach to address the resource issues as we see them on the ground, and which Greg will talk more about. But that involves leveraging all of the resources of our Forest Fire Service, as well as the resources of our Forest Service and Park Service staff who are so involved in operating parks and making them available to the public. We have to have the intersection of all of those elements to ensure a safe, thriving environment for the public to enjoy, but importantly for today's conversation, to ensure that we're protecting the public and protecting the natural resources on the ground. And we have some significant challenges in the Pinelands in particular, where we have high density forests that are extremely flammable. So I just offer that I look forward to working with all of you, and we will continue to advance these priorities to ensure that we have the safest environment that we can offer to the public. So with that, Greg, I'll flip it back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. And so just to lay out the agenda for today's call, to continue to lay it out, after I'm finished, we'll go to James Douglas, who is our communications coordinator for our area. And one of the things that we did internally this year with Kelly and the communications folks at DEP was to develop what we're calling a wildfire communications plan, and that'll give you some insight into how we feel it may be most efficient to communicate with media during a major wildfire incident. So Jimmy will finish up with that, and then we'll go back to Karen and Kelly for some other notes. And of course, we can entertain any questions that you may have. So right now we are in our prescribed burning season. The Forest Fire Agency is structured somewhat in a military manner, in that we tend to try to break things into smaller units, so we have span of control to manage those units. We have 3 regional divisions spread out throughout the state: north, central, and south. Then within those divisions, we have sections. So they're sub areas of a division. There are about 10 sections within each division. The northern division boundary goes from the Raritan River north. The central division goes from the Raritan River to the Mullica River, and the southern division goes from the Mullica River south. There's about 10 of those subsections within each division. Each of those subsections has a full-time staff field fire warden that is on duty year-round, 24/7. That fire warden is responsible for all activities related to wildfire, including prescribed burning. So a few years ago, we went through an exercise statewide, section by section, asking each of those wardens to identify areas of priorities that they would feel that were highest risk for fuels mitigation, prescribed burning. And we put together a listing of those, and we came up with approximately a target statewide of about 25,000 acres per year. So our target for prescribed burning statewide is 25,000 acres. Accomplishing that target goal is predominantly dependent on weather. We have to have the fuels be in a condition of curing, essentially drying, so that they are burnable, because our goal here is to reduce fuels, reduce the vegetation. So we want fire, when we put it on the ground intentionally through this prescription, to consume the fuels in an effective way. We work off of a plan, and that plan is individual to a specific project as well as strategic across the landscape. And we work within a weather window so that we're safe and the fire's manageable. Once we begin to get out of that weather window where we start to see humidities dropping into the teens, temperatures rising above 60 degrees, that usually happens around the middle to the end of March. And that starts to be the trigger point for us to say we're going to shut down prescribed burning and we're going to start to shift over and gear up for wildfire season. So during our prescribed burning season, we'll have individual sections out conducting these burns to complete these projects. In 2021, we completed 627 individual projects statewide for a total of 17,940 acres. So far in 2022, we've completed almost 2,000 acres, 1,998 acres on 149 projects. We still have our weather window here and some opportunity for a couple more weeks to continue. Obviously, we're still short of our target of 20 to 25,000 acres. To Commissioner LaTourrette's point, the seasonality of our prescribed burning and fire season, we have seen a change. We have seen a shift. A couple of years ago, we had a fire in February, which would typically be prescribed burning season. Last year, March 14th, we had the major fire in Lakewood. So we're starting to see a shift in the seasonality of when these wildfires may be happening. Typically, the wildfire season would run from end of March until about early May. Last year we had a wildfire late in May, about the middle of May. So the traditional prescribed burning season of middle of October to middle of March has kind of shifted, and the traditional wildfire season beginning of April to middle of May, and that's our peak wildfire season. And so that's why we're talking about this now, because we're going to be coming into that peak wildfire season soon. So just on that, shifting into wildfire season, we did have in 2021 946 wildfires, 1,972 acres. So far this year, we've had 88 fires for 67 acres. Most of these fires are small. These fires are quarter acre, half acre, 1 acre in size. Some of these fires can, given conditions, get large. When a fire goes over 100 acres, we consider it a major fire. And that triggers some factors on our side in terms of situation reporting and movement of command posts and movement of resources from other areas around the state. And so that's something that Jimmy will talk a little bit about in our messaging during a major wildfire. It happens to be peak wildfire season in April. And that's historic. We've had most of our large wildfires in April. And the reason is because you will see these lowered humidities, these increase in wind events that drive fire. You'll see this quick drying ability, especially in the pinelands, because it's sandy soil, so there's not a lot of moisture holding capacity to the soil. And all of the vegetation that's deciduous, that has leaves, essentially not coniferous or pine, hasn't leafed out yet. So given that fires start on the ground, that those ground fuels, those pine needles and those leaves, they dry out quickly because they're not shaded yet. As you get into full leaf out of your canopy trees, of your oaks and your maples, more towards the middle of May, end of May, the humidity rises significantly, and you have leaf out covering, shading the forest floor, so those ground fuels don't dry out as quickly. If we get into a drought in the summer, we'll have fires in the summer, and those fires will be significant. Typically those fires turf, meaning that duff layer and that turf on the ground is dried out, and those fires smolder a lot. They can even burn underground. And then we'll have a second smaller fire season in the fall. after the leaves drop and there's that accumulation of fuels on the ground again, and we will see a little bit of a dip in humidities, and we tend to get a drying pattern in September and October. So that was about all I wanted to go over real quickly in terms of, our prescribed burning and, coming into wildfire season. And I think a big focus of this discussion is about our communication with you folks during our during a wildfire incident. So, Jimmy?
Thanks, Greg. I'm just going to share my screen real quick to help you guys see some of the things that I'm going to be showing you today. So first, to follow up on prescribed burn season, I just wanted to show you all a new tool that the Forest Fire Service has released this year. If you go to njwildfire.org and then scroll down to the dashboard section here, all the way on the right, you'll see the prescribed fire notifications dashboard. So if you click on that, we don't have any prescribed burns scheduled right now because of the upcoming rain event that we are expecting tonight into tomorrow. But over the next few days, you'll start seeing this map get populated. And on this map, if you look over here, you can see the different keys. So an active burn would be in red, and in orange would be a scheduled burn. And we try and get these burns up on this dashboard a few days in advance, which will help residents know when they might be able to expect a prescribed burn in their area. At the same time, every day that prescribed burning is happening, we also post on the New Jersey Forest Fire Service's Facebook and Twitter accounts with a graphic and then a listing of prescribed burns and the locations that they'll be taking place. Just touching on our Twitter account real quick, this is a new account. This came into effect about 2 weeks ago now. We're almost at 100 followers, so we would appreciate if you all followed at NJDEP Forest Fire, so we can continue growing our presence there. Now, during an active wildfire, we want to be, I'll stop sharing my screen now. We want to be as transparent as possible with getting information out to you all and as quickly as possible. We thought the best way of doing this would be through social media. So as soon as a wildfire triggers one of our trigger points, so we know it's going to go over 100 acres, a major wildfire, if major roadways are shut down, or if, let's say, trails or a campground in a state park had to be evacuated. That will trigger a posting on our social media, both Facebook and Twitter, that acknowledges that a fire is taking place. And then from there, we are going to be releasing updates as soon as possible. And in each update that we are releasing this year, we will say the size of the fire and containment percentage. At the end of each of those posts, we will also, we'll also give a time frame that you all will be able to expect the next update to be released. We are also going to be releasing a definitions list at the end of those posts to help both you and the general public understand maybe some of the lesser known terms that may be included in these updates. In the chat here now, I'm going to put a wildfire terminology list that you all can reference in the future, if it will let me put it in here. If not, Karen will send it around to you all later. It, for some reason, it's not letting me put it in the chat. So Karen, if you don't mind, I will send you the finalized terminology list, and then if you could please send it around to everyone on this call.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And that is pretty much it for me. Our Facebook account is New Jersey Forest Fire Service, and it's verified, so it's easy to know which one is ours. And then, like I said earlier, and as Kelly put in the chat, the new Twitter is at NJDEP Forest Fire. So thank you. Back to you, Greg.
Okay, I just want to turn things over a minute to Rob Gill and just talk about, again, our internal structure for your awareness in terms of how we're set up when an actual major wildfire incident is happening and how our communication is working. And so for that, I'm going to turn to Rob Gill.
Good afternoon, everyone. Rob Gill, Forest Fire Warden for out of Trenton headquarters. And as Chief McLaughlin and Jimmy Douglas mentioned, that you're going to have situation reports that are coming out during a major wildfire. They're going to come from Trenton staff. And I'm part of Trenton staff. There's 3 other folks on Trenton staff who will produce those situation reports. So you're going to see my face out on fires. You're probably going to see my name on a SIT report if it happens to be my day for Trenton duty, but you will see others. So you won't see that same face because we're on a rotating schedule with our duties to do that SIT report. So you know, just letting you know, if you see our names and you store that number as a contact, and you give us a call on a fire and it's not our day, we may not have that information, but we'll definitely forward you in the right direction. So when there's a wildfire, we do mobilize. We go out and we support the incident command team that goes out on the fires from Trenton staff, and we're the information folks. So on other things besides my Trenton duties, I'm the fire aviation officer for our agency, for both of our aircraft that we have here, agency owned and operated, as well as contracted. So that would be the aircraft that you see that flies and drops water. One thing that's coming into the forefront through the media and through the private sector are the use of drones. We do have several requests for the use of drones when we do have a fire, whether it's a small fire, big fire, as well as on prescribed burns. If we have our aircraft flying, it could be a problem if you put your drone up and it does not go through our press office and through us and eventually me. It's a problem not only here in New Jersey, but nationally, trying to ring in drones flying on wildfires from folks that we can't control. But we would definitely ask your help with ones that we can control through your news outlets. We will do our best to allow you to fly. There's several things that we want to do to deconflict the airspace. And I'm not just one talking saying we can't do it. You know, put my face in those aircraft, because if I don't have Trenton duty, or if I'm called on to hop on one of those aircraft to fly and do ops, I'm the face that's going to be up there flying around, and I'm the one that could get clobbered along with my co-workers who fly in the aviation unit if there is a problem. So please, I can't ask you enough, please go through us, because it is an issue. But I think we can share the airspace and get you what you need. Along the lines of safety, there's also when you folks arrive onto a fire scene, please use caution if you're going into that fire area. I know if I take folks out, if I have the duty and I'm given the PIO, Public Information Officer role, I always ask that you go slow, follow one of our units, and just something as simple as putting your headlights on will cut through that smoke when you're coming through an area. You don't know where those people are going to be that are either onlookers who are living in those areas, or some of our folks that have the yellow shirts on fighting the fire. So please, when you go into those areas, use caution, drive carefully, and as soon as you come into that area where you start to smell or see smoke, you know, put those headlights on. If you don't have those automatic headlights, just put the headlights on. It just does a great deal to help. And the best thing you do is get in contact with the press office. They'll relay the info, or either the area where we're going to have press conferences, or we're going to assemble the media and go right to that spot, and we'll do our best to safely get you the news that you need, because we know all of you have a job to do, and we want to help you report, because like the chief said, you're a part of our operation to get that message out. And you know, you help us and we'll help you, and it'll be a a good thing when those things come together safely. So that's all I have. Anything I missed, Chief?
So just to reiterate and emphasize the importance of what we appoint as our state duty officer, that position is rotating on a daily basis, and then through the weekend. When there is a major fire incident, we will leave the duty officer on a daily basis in charge to carry through if that fire goes over several days. So your point of contact could change on any given day, but in the case of a major fire, for continuity and consistency, we want to leave that person in charge till that incident is finished. So you have the same point of contact. But the idea here is that the state duty officer is collecting information from all three of those divisions around the state about ongoing incidents, and they're also helping to make decisions about resources that may need to be moved, aircraft that may need to be dispatched. So it's a clearinghouse for the information. So it's best to, if you want to get the most up-to-date, accurate, and sourced information, it's going to come from that point. If the duty officer's busy or it's chaotic, we're working with our comms folks and our press office to help us get that information out to you. They're getting that information from the state duty officer. So I bring this up because a lot of times folks are getting information from the incident or from local sources. Maybe that's local municipal police and fire. That information isn't always synced with our information at the state level.
Okay, Greg, thank you for that. Rob, Jimmy, and John, as well as Commissioner LaTourette earlier. Before we move to Q&A, I just want to go back to Jimmy Douglas for a moment so he can share with our reporter colleagues a prescribed burning demonstration opportunity that's coming up and that you might be interested in. And then when Jimmy's done with that, we'll go to Q&A.
Thank you, Karen. So just quickly, I want to let you all know that next Wednesday, March 2nd in Bass River State Forest, we are going to be hosting a prescribed burning demonstration. Again, all this is weather dependent, but as of right now, looking at the extended forecast, we believe that we will be able to conduct it on March 2nd. And Commissioner LaTourette is going to join us out there, and we invite you all to come. Karen will be providing more details on the March 1st, the day before Tuesday, about exact meeting locations and timing.
Thank you, Jimmy. At this point, we'll go to Q&A. If you have any questions, just please use the hand raising function and I'll call on people in order. So we'll first go to Scott Fallon with NorthJersey.com.
Thanks, Karen. Just on climate change, has there been any evidence in an increase in the number of fires, the intensity of the fires, the damage they cause over the last several years? And also to the chief, is this a concern? Do you expect wildfires to get worse in this state as we've seen out west?
So I'll jump in there in the first instance. I think what you would see from our scientific report on climate change, Scott, is that we do project an increasing risk for wildfire, and that's directly related to the periods between rain events being longer, right, causing more frequent drought conditions, possibly lower water supply availability. All of that is related. At the same time, of course, that we see temperature increases intensifying as well. So all of those things happening together, and that is detailed more in the scientific report on climate change that we put out in about a year and a half ago. And the other point to note there relative to that piece of work is the projection that wildfire seasons will likely lengthen or become more intense as a function of those hotter, drier periods. And that's New Jersey specific. That's not a global projection.
Greg, is there anything you wanted to add to that before I move on to the next reporter?
Well, only specific to his question about, some of the trends and patterns. Fire numbers actually have decreased in the last couple of years. That's somewhat of an unknown to us as to why. We would attribute some of it to our prevention and education efforts. It could be attributed to the fact that, people aren't moving around as much in the outdoors during the pandemic, considering that 98, 99% of fires are human caused. And so we've seen, our numbers used to run upwards of 1,500 fires on average. And so we're at about 1,000 average. And so to that question, we've seen a decline. To the question and to Commissioner's statement, we are definitely seeing a change attributed to climate in how fuels are accumulating based on large rain events. We've seen years where we've had really low fire numbers because we've had record rainfall events, and the very next year, we've had the warmest January and February's on record. And, those wide swings in climate make things happen differently in the natural world. So, when we talk about risk, it's about what do we have? We have some of the most volatile fuels in the country. As Commissioner Latourette pointed out, 42% of the state is forested. It's the most densely populated state in the nation. So our risk is heightened by the fact that we have a lot of people here, people that we're trying to protect. Those are our valued assets.
Thank you, Greg. John Hurdle with Spotlight.
Yeah, hi, Karen. So given what the Commission just said about the expectation, the higher risk of wildfires as a result of climate change, I mean, what more precautions, what measures are the fire authorities taking to anticipate that?
Education, maintenance, and eradication of fuel sources, ensuring our readiness, asking you to help everyone else ensure their own readiness. I think climate change equals weather weird, and a lot is unpredictable. Fire safety is incredibly important, and the more that we can better educate the public as to risk, as to what should be avoided, the better. But we clearly have to keep up our work on prescribed burning so that we do not leave spaces an effective tinderbox. And that is what the folks of our Forest Fire Service are focused on at this particular point in the preseason. And we've got to continue to amplify those efforts. Greg, do you have anything further you'd like to add to that?
Yes, thank you. So, we as an agency and as a department, we know what our mission is, but we do rely heavily on a lot of our partners, and we consider the public to be a partner. So we have a very active and aggressive community preparedness program where we'll go into communities that we've identified as high risk, and we'll help to get them plans to what we create defensible space. This may be changing their landscaping. This may be creating an evacuation plan. And what we've experienced over the past 15, 20 years working with these communities, some of these communities have lost homes and they've been evacuated. They've become really creative in driving this community preparedness program to come up with simple ideas for how they can be better prepared, be better ready to understand simple things. It's several times I've been in a community that's being evacuated from a fire and the residents are lost. They're lost. They don't know how to exit out of their community. It's pandemonium, it's smoke, it's lights, sirens, it's chaos. So just simple things like that. Where do we go and which way do we exit? Who in our community has special needs, that's handicapped, that may need help evacuating? And so we're taking measures to work with our local OEMs, county, fire, and police to have them trained as to what happens in the event of a wildland-urban interface fire, where we're going to have evacuations. We may have structures on fire, road closures, and so on and so forth. And that's part of our preparedness effort, right? So prescribed burning and fuels management and education, that's part of our prevention. Part of our preparedness is working with the communities. And part of our training is having exercises and drills in the off season, the what if and what to do when this happens. And then in terms of staffing, we have 21 fire lookout towers spread out strategically around the state. And those fire towers are taking weather readings twice a day. So they're feeding back to the field fire wardens what's going on. And as things are increasing in terms of the weather being conducive to fire starts and spread, we'll increase our staffing, and that means we'll put active patrols on. We'll even bring in on contract aircraft, extra aircraft, so we can respond to these fires quickly. So our whole system is built on rapid detection, rapid response, keep the fire small.
Well, just to follow up on that for 1 second. So what's the most important thing that the public can do, excuse me, in terms of preventing wildfires?
So it's really knowing when the season is, because the general perception is connected to the large wildfires that are happening in California and other states in the West in the summertime. And that general perception is that our fire season must be the same because that's what we're hearing about in the news, when in fact our fire season and the peak is in the spring. And so spring brings with it nice weather. People want to get outdoors. They want to cook. They want to have campfires. All the things that go with that. It's time to clean out the fireplace or the chimney or the wood stove. And well, maybe those ashes are still hot. I mean, there's I don't know how many backyard wooden fences I've seen burned up from people just dumping the ashes over the fence and not realizing how hot they are. And then a couple hours later, their fence is on fire.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John. Rye Rivard with Politico.
Hi, thank you. This is a question for Greg and Robert. Two things. One, I just wanted to make sure the numbers are right. 946 wildfires, 1,972 acres. And can somebody provide a list of those incidents? That's one. And the second thing, for future coverage, I know this varies, at least in California, they use a containment number during an active incident. And I'm wondering, God forbid there's a major fire. How does New Jersey define containment? Is that a sort of standard definition or a guesstimate by the incident commander? And sort of how should we interpret that figure or a similar figure?
Got a list.
Okay, so to confirm, it was 946 fires. It's 2021, 1,972.25 to be exact on the acreage. And yeah, we can get you a list of that. I made a note. Jimmy, were you going to talk about the containment and the messaging?
Yeah, I was just going to say that in the definitions that Karen's going to be providing, there is a definition for containment in that list. And as like I said earlier, the containment percentage, that is going to be released in every single social media post that we're putting out this year with updates on a major fire.
Just to follow up, I've covered fires where there has been, something like 0% containment, but actually the fire's advance has been halted. So can you just help us understand? Some people think when it's 0% contained that it's spreading uncontrollably. In some cases, it will actually not be spreading, but 0% contained. Can you just sort of help us understand when you tell us that figure, what it will mean?
Yeah, and I'm going to defer to Greg and Rob for that one.
Yeah, so it's a good question, and I know this number comes up a lot with this figure, or this estimate, I should say, comes up a lot when we're talking about wildfires, and it's a common term that's used across the country. Perhaps it means something different to each individual state and fire agency and how they're estimating it. So for us, containment is our confidence, is what it really is. It's our confidence in that what we've strategically decided as the stopping area of this particular incident or fire, this identified strategic containment area. It's how much of that containment area do we feel is secure enough, and we're confident enough that that fire is not going to escape that area and go into a new area.
Thank you, Rye. Amanda Oglesby with the Asbury Park Press.
Thanks for taking my question. This is probably best directed at the commissioner. We've seen a lot of building in Ocean County and demand for housing in very high risk fire areas like Southern Ocean County. Some of these areas are building very large, retirement communities, people that may have a harder time evacuating. Has the DEP considered, fire risk at any point when it reviews these housing applications?
So is a very layered question. I think part of it comes down to whether or not DEP has to review a particular application for a particular development. The department is not a master building permit office for the state, and so oftentimes that consideration is really at the local level, right? In terms of whether it's master planning on the local government level, or if it is a matter of site plan approval before a local land use board. So I can't speak to their to what their points of consideration are or should be. But certainly what we are attentive to is from the perspective of where we would have regulatory authority from a land use perspective under the Coastal Area Facilities Review Act, or CAFRA. We are very attentive to the amount of tree cover that is within a particular development envelope, and the proximity of that tree cover to the development itself. So I think we'd probably have to leave it there from the perspective of where our authority is. And Greg, I would turn it to you to talk about how the education component with respect to our local government engagement is critical in that respect, right? Because when you have this density of development that's right along that corridor, you are inviting a degree of risk, and to be informed about that, and for a future homeowner to be informed about that, I think is very important. Greg, what has been your experience in engaging with the local governments around that type of an issue?
Yeah, so this is a great question and a great subject, and one that, I feel really confident speaking about because I have a lot of firsthand experience working in this area. Our local section field fire wardens, I described earlier how they're spread out around the state. They work with the local OEMs and the local municipalities, and those municipalities, those planning departments, they'll ask our field fire wardens to review plans and give input and recommendations for things like turnarounds for fire engines, defensible space, fuel breaks. Some of our experience, and I think we're turning the corner on it over the years, is that maybe some of the guidelines for fuel breaks and defensible space have been ignored. But I know we made a lot of progress in getting to the table and getting a better understanding among the municipal officials. I mean, let's face it, if you're building a large plan development, you want to maximize the number of dwelling units you have on site. If we're asking you to take an area, in some cases 200 feet wide around the entire development, that's going to be a loss in dwelling units. So we did discover through our community work that we had to work backwards in a sense to establish some of these fuel breaks. But over time, we saw an uptick in the attention to this requirement of having things that relate to fire safety being done in the early stages of the planning.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you very much.
Eric Conklin with the Press of Atlantic City.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon now. Yeah, one question I have, actually I have two questions. The press covers a pretty unique area of New Jersey, specifically along the coast. Has the DEP noticed more of an increased threat in for large scale wildfires in the past few years because of changing climate, or specifically the changing climate of the of those marsh areas, or those areas that typically are a little bit more, they have more moisture to them because they're close to a barrier of water. The other question too is that I know that the federal, I kind of wanted to touch on the president's infrastructure bill. I know that bill is being used to address various amounts of different infrastructure needs in the country. I haven't really seen anything from any of the state agencies about, I guess, anything with the DEP regarding infrastructure money. Is the DEP or is the state of New Jersey trying to maybe try to utilize some of those federal infrastructure funds from President Biden's infrastructure plan to try to maybe address in a way that would be able to address wildfires?
So, Greg, if you can respond to the part of the question that's about the frequency of wildfires that are more coastal in nature, I'm happy to take the infrastructure question.
Okay, sure. So, given our sort of geographic positioning in the landscape in New Jersey, that we have these prevailing west winds We have our fuels in the central part of the state. We have a lot of our development on the eastern part of the state. We could see, and we are starting to see, fires that are spreading with a west wind and encapsulating major roads like the Garden State Parkway. The fire we had in March last year, it walked right across 4 lanes of the Garden State Parkway without even a second of thought of stopping. And the fire that we had in Little Egg in May, we were lucky to hold that at Route 9 before it was going to go into other areas on the east side and in those coastal areas. We do have a number of Phragmites generated fires in marshes along the coast. The fires along the coast are tricky because the winds change. That prevailing west wind that's driving fire from west to east sometimes can change with a sea breeze and a temperature change. So we do have a concern for risks there, and we are seeing a frequency. And some of the research that we've been doing with the U.S. Forest Service, and we're working on a new video product on Ember Threats. We're getting a much better understanding of how embers travel and how far they can travel and how they act to ignite new fires. And we're learning that these embers can travel up to and beyond a mile and start new fires.
Eric, to your question on the infrastructure bill, the federal infrastructure bill's implications for New Jersey, the majority of those benefits to the state are transportation-related projects and environmental infrastructure projects. I've not yet seen a piece of that bill being utilized for forest fire protection. That's not to say that piece doesn't exist. I've just not been part of any conversations with the Department of Interior relative to anything that is flowing through that federal agency, which could have benefits for some of our Department of Interior-like functions, Forest Fire Service being one of those. But the majority of what we are working on so far are in the water infrastructure space, where there's about $1 billion for the state over the next 5 years, as well as in the flood resilience space. So as we get further down the road with some of our federal partners and the other agencies, we'll certainly come back to this group if there looks to be an opportunity to emphasize forest protection, either from the perspective of the public's ability to use the forests or from a forest fire perspective. But one would expect that to be part of the climate package that has not yet gotten the airtime in Congress that it so deserves.
Okay, thanks.
Folks, at this point, we are at 1 o'clock, but it looks like we may possibly have some follow-up questions. Do we have a few more minutes to take a follow-up or two?
I can take one more before I have to hop.
John Hurdle, did you have a follow-up question?
No, I did not.
Okay. Any of our reporter guests, does anyone have any follow-ups? Okay, then. Well, I would like to thank all of you for joining us today. Commissioner or Greg or John, any final words that you would like to add?
Listen to Smokey Bear. It's pretty simple. Thank you for your time and attention today, and we'll be with you again soon, I'm sure.
And thank you.
And I will be reaching out to all of the reporters with a variety of information that we discussed on the call today. If you have any questions, you can email me or give me a call. Thank you again for joining us. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.